Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Cybersecurity in Focus session. I'm Katie Watson, and I'm very excited to announce our very first live panel discussion. Thank you to everyone joining us today. And for those who aren't familiar with Secon, we are a boutique cybersecurity consultancy who bring clarity and not confusion. We believe in helping people make confident decisions and not overwhelming them with jargon and hype. And that is exactly why we are here today. Our session, ZTNA Unfiltered, a live panel on what's working and what's just hype, is about cutting through the buzzwords to have a real grounded conversation about ZTNA, SASE, and Zero Trust. So today we have brought together a panel of hands-on experts who've worked with these technologies day in and day out, not just talking about them, but implementing them, troubleshooting them, and seeing what works in the real world. So I am very excited to introduce you to today's panel. So first up, we've got Linton Geach, the technical director here at Secon. Then we've got Hayden Anderson, who is our senior security consultant here at Secon. Next up is Ritchie Fry, Channel Solutions Engineer at Cato Network. And finally, Siamplettos, Pre-Sales Consultant at Infinigate. So just before we start today, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. The session will run for about 45 minutes and it is being recorded, so don't worry about taking notes. We will be sending the full recording to you afterwards. If you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A function throughout the event and we will go over them at the end. And if, like me, you only think of your question after the event has ended, don't panic. You can email me at katie.watson@seconcyber.com. So without further ado, let me hand over to the experts. Linton, over to you to kick off.
Thanks, Katie. Appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. As Katie mentioned, I'm Linton. I'm the technical director at Secon, and I'll be hosting the session today. Today's not a slide deck or a sales pitch. It's an open discussion about how Zero Trust and ZTNA are being used in the real environments. What's changing, what organizations are still getting wrong, and I'm really looking forward to the session today. Please feel free to engage and ask questions throughout the discussion, and we'll answer them towards the end. Katie will manage all those questions, and she'll ask them on your behalf. To kick things off, we have a short poll to get you thinking ZTNA and your organization. So please take a moment to answer, and we'll share that with you at the end. And let's get straight into it. So let's start with the basics. The term Zero Trust and ZTNA get used almost interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. How do you explain the difference to clients who are trying to cut through the jargon? I'm going to start with Ritchie here. Ritchie?
Yeah, hi, Linton. Hello, everybody, and great. Thank you very much for inviting me today. Okay, difference between Zero Trust and ZTNA, as you rightly say, they are interchangeable and people mistake them all the time. But actually, the difference is really, really simple. Okay, Zero Trust essentially is a strategy, it's an end goal, all right? Whereas ZTNA is a tool to help you achieve that. So think of Zero Trust as the set of non-negotiable rules for your entire organization, all right? Mindset, never trust, always verify. Now, because in a Zero Trust network, what you have to do is you assume that your perimeter has been breached, right? And then that strategy, with that in mind, has to apply to every user, every device, every connection, and you apply it whether that's inside or outside your network. Now, ZTNA, on the other hand, that's a specific technology that you use to enforce that strategy when someone, a remote user, needs to access a private application. It's what allows you to check their identity, check the health of their laptop, perhaps, and then, when you've done all that, and only then, give them a secure application-specific connection with the minimum level of access that they require to complete that task. Nothing else, only that task. It's a critical piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole problem. It doesn't solve the whole Zero Trust problem on its own.
And Kerry, from a channel perspective, do you agree or do you see people approach it differently?
Excellent question there, Linton. Yes, I definitely agree with Rich's definition there. And in my experience, within the channel, most partners get the distinction, but sometimes I see people treating ZTNA as if it's zero trust on its own and thinking that just deploying a ZTNA solution completes their strategy. But in reality, ZTNA is a tool to enforce zero trust, as Ritchie mentioned as well, especially for remote access and application level security as well. But the broader strategy still needs to cover every user, every device, and every connection within your network as well. And it's really about combining the available tools provided to you to make zero trust work end to end.
And Hayden, in practice, where do you think most organizations fall short when trying to apply zero trust principles?
Yeah, that's a good question. And honestly, a very relevant one. What I generally tend to find is zero trust has become a bit of a buzzword lately. And in my experience, a lot of organizations still struggle when it comes to actually making it work in practice. So an example of this is one of the biggest challenges is identity and access management. True zero trust, isn't it about logging in once and you're done? It's about a continuous validation and verification. Who you are, where you are, what you're using, and giving you only the access that you really need at that given point in time, and ensuring that your device is secure before it actually allows the connection. And that's the ongoing validation and where many organizations fall short. You then look at data classification. Far too often we overlook that aspect. You can't really protect what you don't really understand. To apply a proper zero trust model, you need to know who needs access to those systems and how they're going to access those systems. Otherwise, you can't apply security policies to those systems. They either become too loose or too strict. And finally, governance and planning. This plays a huge part around this. We've already talked about zero trust being a strategy. We need a clear plan, and we need to make sure that we understand those zero trust goals before we move to actually deploy them. Otherwise, we're just going to drift away from them.
I mean, it's clear zero trust is a journey, and it's quite hard to go on that journey without hearing about VPN replacement and ZTNA. VPN's been around forever, and most organizations will still depend on it. So why the sudden push to move to ZTNA? Kiri, you must have had multiple customer conversations around VPN replacement. What are the main pain points customers raise about legacy VPN?
So from my experience there, Linton, working with customers constantly, the three biggest pain points that came across me with traditional VPNs are usually performance, security, and visibility as well, which visibility is also linked with compliance, which I'll touch on later on. First one, performance. I've seen a lot of clients struggle with VPNs funneling all the traffic through a central gateway or a concentrator, which slow down the performance during peak times. And also VPNs are using public internet access to access a particular resource, which also impacts the performance as well. Then the second one, which is security, many clients assume that once a VPN is in place, all the resources are safe. But essentially, as Ritchie mentioned as well previously, right, VPNs give broad network access. So if a device is compromised, then attackers can move laterally and access far more than they usually should. And the last one is around visibility, which is one of the biggest challenges that I hear from customers, and is simply not knowing what users are actually accessing when they're connecting to a VPN. So without clear visibility into who's accessing what, it's really hard to enforce these policies and spot risky behavior on the go as well. And that's where ZTNA comes in to solve these issues and address these issues as well. A true ZTNA solution grants users access only to specific applications they need, while also enforcing device posture policies to ensure the endpoint is healthy and compliant, to make sure you have the correct level of security in order to access your resources as well. And lastly, ZTNA provides better visibility, which also helps organizations meet their compliance and auditing requirements to also assist their SOC and NOC teams to adapt for these specific requirements as well.
I think for me, you hit the nail on the head on the visibility side of things, and VPN gets you to the front door, and once you're through the front door, you don't have visibility of where that user is actually going. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. In practice, Hayden, from your side, what does the transition actually look like, though?
So, transitioning from a VPN solution, traditional VPN solution, to a ZTNA, it's best done in a strategic phased approach. Understanding that it's not just simply a replacement of the traditional VPN, but rather a new approach to delivering applications to clients. So, for me, the first step is really assessing the current access landscape, and then taking those access requirements and then defining the ZTNA objectives. In this stage, we will look at sort of how we provide access and to who has that access. And then we look at, is there a better way of delivering that access to customers, not just doing the traditional network allocation. The second step for me is one of the most key things around ZTNA, and that is, establishing a trust anchor. When we talk about ZTNA, one of the biggest requirements for ZTNA is constant validation. Whether it be the identity or the device itself, it is key towards a successful ZTNA deployment. So, a trust anchor is quite important to this deployment. Thirdly, we would move to a small-scale ZTNA pilot, and in this area, we would actually test, the policies and the processes to ensure that we don't disrupt the users or hinder their operations. Because one of the biggest things is, if we start doing that, we end up having pushback from those customers, and you will find it harder to deploy your solution. So that's quite a key aspect of that. Once you've then done that, we roll out into the final rollout of the solution, and then we can roll it out to all the customers.
Okay. Ritchie, you and I were chatting the other day, and we were talking about a real-world example. Are you happy to share that with the guys online at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I have to anonymize them, but yeah, absolutely. So we had a client in financial services, right? And actually, financial services is a very rich vertical for Cato Networks, probably our richest, actually. But anyway, this organization had 1,500 remote users. Their VPN was creating, I think the number was 300 help desk tickets a month, right? Oh. Just for the remote access issues. That was authentication failures, sluggish performance, VPN client errors, right, on the end devices. Now, after they migrated to ZTNA, by the way, guys, I've noticed, I digress slightly, I'm the only one using the Americanized version of this, aren't I? I noticed everybody's gone ZTNA. I'm drinking the vendor Kool-Aid and go to ZTNA. Yeah. Anyway, right, so I'll get back on track. I did warn you I do this. So after they migrated to ZTNA, that ticket volume, right, the bit relating to remote access, dropped by over 80% in the first month, right? So the measurable improvement was actually in the time to first packet latency. Okay, so because ZTNA solutions are typically brokered closer to the user in a global cloud architecture, then they saw their application responsiveness dramatically improve, right? And the key is that ZTNA only gives them a direct, secure connection to the one app they need, instead of funneling to some sort of distant corporate data center first. It was a massive win, that one, for the user experience team.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like, every vendor claims to do zero trust now. Some of it feels more like clever rebranding. Hayden, we've had a number of conversations as well. How can someone tell if a solution is truly ZTNA and not just a VPN with the new kind of brand on it?
That's actually an excellent question. What I do tend to find is vendors are obviously just rebranding their legacy VPNs or remote access solutions. Other than that, well, they're taking multiple components of their existing solutions and they're cobbling it together to make a zero trust solution. But for me, true ZTNA has architectural and operational policy level differences that go way beyond the new marketing languages. If you look at it, some core differences between VPN and ZTNA lies in the level of access granted, as well as the point of authentication. If you look at traditional VPNs, they normally grant network level access. With ZTNA, you're only granting access to a specific application or resource. Another key differentiator between the two is that while VPN performs a one-time authentication, ZTNA is a continual evaluation of the identity and posture of the session. And what that allows you to do is act on conditions defined in policies to deny sessions and stop sessions. Whereas a traditional VPN, you have to wait until the end of the session or someone manually intervening in that. A couple of questions that you can ask yourselves around these questions is, can users reach anything other than the expected application that you're publishing? If the answer is yes, more than likely you're still a VPN-based solution. Okay. Can you enforce policy changes dynamically? If you can, you've got a ZTNA solution. If you're not, more than likely you're using a traditional VPN. And then lastly, where are the security controls applied? ZTNA generally tends to apply them at the application edge, whereas VPN does it at the network edge. Linton?
Cool. Cato has a very strong view on this. Ritchie, how do you separate real zero trust enforcement from remote access and disguise from a Cato perspective?
Oh, well, difficult to think of things that Hayden didn't bring up with his fantastic answer there, really. But I guess for me, the biggest red flag for a rebranded VPN, or I think a dupe is what the cool kids would call it these days, Linton. It's the level of network access that it grants. I think that is the big one, and Hayden touched on that. So, a true ZTNA solution adheres strictly to least privileged access. Right? When a user connects, they should only be able to see and access the specific application that they've been authorized for, right? Nothing else. Now, a ZTNA Lite or a rebranded VPN will often drop that user into a broad network segment or subnet once they've authenticated, and that will expose all the surrounding internal assets to them. And if they know what they're doing, then we know the dangers famously that can bring. All right, plenty of examples out there for that. So I guess another red flag for me is whereby a ZTNA connection is made, but then the platform, maybe it kind of just publishes and stitches it together, but then the platform steps back, right, and doesn't take any further part in that transaction. So there's no IPS, no anti-malware, posture checking, none of that going on. That's what I see. I'd be interested actually to see, because Kyriakos sees a lot of sort of this from different angles. What are you seeing across the different vendors in the channel, Kyriakos? Are they getting confused by this messaging as well?
Yeah, excellent question there, Ritchie. Yes, definitely I've noticed some confusion in the market, right? Most of the vendors that are out there, they use similar buzzwords, but the level of enforcement that can vary quite a bit. Some focus mainly on the initial access side of things, while others take it a step further with continuous checks, stronger security controls, and more flexible policies as well that adapt to the different users, devices, or applications that an organization is using as well, right? And the difference often comes down to how comprehensively a solution applies zero trust principles that we talked before throughout the user session, not just at the point of connection.
Yeah, and Hayden, you've had the opportunity to implement a few different vendors. Do you think some vendors overpromise here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do believe that, Linton. A lot of times I do believe that vendors overpromise their abilities to execute on a true ZTNA model. And that's really down to because their solutions are really born out of their legacy VPN solutions. If you look at it, they often require additional components that don't natively integrate with other third-party solutions. They rely heavily on their own ecosystems to deliver those services. And this often leads technical teams having to find workarounds to complete deployments. And what that then leads to is complex setups and often compromises in security. And that's something we're trying to get away from.
Yeah, thanks, Hayden. It's a great point. I'd like to kind of touch on the architecture. Some companies are shifting towards one integrated platform while others still prefer point solutions for flexibility. Before I chat to our experts, we've got a poll to get through on the topic. So, Kate, if you can just throw that poll up for us. Ritchie, what's the argument for the consolidation approach?
Well, it is, it is a massive topic. One of the hottest, if not the hottest topic, I think, out there at the moment, this whole platformization. I think the argument for doing it is multifaceted, right? Every time you introduce a new point solution, be it a new ZTNA tool, a separate cloud firewall, a dedicated CASB, when you do that, you introduce a new policy engine, a new data store, perhaps a new management console. And as we all know, and is well publicized, complexity is the enemy of security. Plus, the enemy of pretty much everything, let's be honest, in everyday life, right? You start to introduce new skill requirements, new support mechanisms, and even new, perhaps, legal and procurement paths, something perhaps we don't really talk about day to day. Now, on a technical level, this fragmentation creates policy gaps. It forces your engineers to perhaps correlate logs manually, and that massively slows down response time. Now, a non-consolidated architecture, it's often got overlap, causing too much noise in some areas, whilst, conversely, and perhaps ironically, having complete blind stops or blind spots in other areas, right? A consolidated platform, however, that allows you to use that single unified security policy that follows the user everywhere they go. It's one console, it's one training path, it's one support mechanism. For your legal and procurement people, it's a single route for them as well.
Yeah, that's good. Kiri, in your space as a distributor, do partners and clients buy into that, or are they still wanting choice and best of breed tools?
So from my experience there, Linton, partners and clients are increasingly recognizing the value of a single unified management platform. They understand that simplifying security management, as well as maintaining those consistent policies and reducing the complexity across your users, devices, and your application, enables businesses to secure their networks a lot more efficiently. But on the other hand, there are some customers that still prefer best of breed tools for specific needs and flexibility sometimes as well for certain use cases. But a consolidated platform just makes life easier, right? Especially when it comes down to IT teams that are quite small and they don't have the capacity to support all the different point-to-point solutions, and also their skill set that is required to manage these solutions as well.
Yeah, that's critical. And Hayden, you've been in the weeds a lot of the times, and from an operating point of view, what works better when managing day-to-day security from your perspective?
Yeah, look, so I mean, from an operational perspective, a single unified platform allows for more efficient designs and simpler deployment strategies. However, while this works in principle, it doesn't always mean it's the right solution for everyone. I mean, we've spoken about this. I think the other guys attached to it quite well. An example of this would be a small organization. They would benefit from an easy deployment and a management perspective. If you've only got 2 or 3 users that are trying to manage a lot, an organization, it makes a lot of sense. However, what you might tend to find is large organizations might find that this single pane does not meet all their requirements. So, for me, you need to understand that Zero Trust is a framework that integrates identity, endpoint, networks, and data, where ZTNA is a specific technology implementing that application of Zero Trust principles to access. So it really does depend on the client sometimes.
I mean, it sounds like there's a balance to be struck. Ritchie, Hayden touched on smaller organizations. Do you think smaller organizations benefit more from consolidation than larger ones?
I think it'd be a struggle to say they benefit more. I think maybe potentially more quickly. So I think organizations with smaller network and security teams, right, that don't have huge teams where they've got, dedicated personnel sort of dedicated, to a single technology, you've got 50 people and they're all doing different single things. I think they'd feel the benefit of that single platform very, very quickly, right? Particularly when we're talking about organizations, only 1 or 2 technical, and support people who are absolutely snowed under, trying to maintain this sort of disparate and diverse architecture with all these technologies. A single platform would be an absolute game changer for them.
We've been talking about the architecture and ZTNA specifically. I mean, if we look at that, a lot of the organizations talking about SASE and ZTNA being part of SASE. It's a particular phrase, that we hear a lot, a single pass. Kiri, for those that don't know what SASE means, would you give us a brief run through on what SASE is?
Sure, yes. So SASE, also called as Secure Access Service Edge, is a network architecture concept that was introduced by Gartner in 2019, and it represents the convergence of networking and security services, primarily delivered through the cloud, in a single unified management platform. So all your networking services like quality of service, your bandwidth management, and so on, and your security services like firewall as a service, your CASB, your DLP, and all the other features that you have available to you are available under one unified platform, which increases your efficiency, your security, and also your visibility, which we mentioned previously as well.
And the platform, you often, specifically from a Cato perspective, talks about a single pass architecture. Can you just kind of elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, of course. So in simple terms, single pass architecture means that all your traffic is inspected and processed just once as it flows through the computation point. A computation point being a point of presence or a location that processes the data in the cloud. And in comparison, traditional setups often route traffic through multiple tools separately, which often adds extra latency, extra complexity as well, and sometimes gaps in protection as well. With the single pass architecture, on the other hand, you gain faster performance, consistent policy enforcement, and unified visibility across all your traffic. And it's a streamlined and a highly efficient approach for securing your users, and it's also purpose-built for modern and distributed environments as well.
Yeah, appreciate that. And Ritchie, from an engineering standpoint, what's the actual performance or visibility gain from a client perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's massive, right? From an engineering standpoint, the gain is significant, right? And it's about efficiency. And it's about completeness of context, and I'll justify that comment in a moment. So, in a traditional security chain, right, that old-fashioned way of doing it, let's do that. You might have 5 different appliances, right? Each decrypting a packet, inspecting it for one thing, let's say malware, and then re-encrypting it and passing it on to the next appliance for its next inspection, right? Let's say DLP, and that has huge latency. Right, it's incredibly inefficient. Particularly, it's that decrypting and re-encrypting that takes so much time in a network context. Now, a single pass architecture means that the packet's decrypted once. Right, all the security and networking policies are applied simultaneously. Your firewall, your ZTNA, your anti-malware, DLP, and then it's re-encrypted and off it goes. And that provides 2 key benefits. One's pretty obvious. That's clearly going to be much faster, right, by removing all that repeated processing. But perhaps less obvious, but equally important, it gives you unified visibility, right? It ensures that all of the security engines saw the same thing, the same information at the same time, right? And that dramatically then improves threat detection.
Yeah, I mean, it's logical. It makes sense to me. And Hayden, do you think clients care about this, or are they just focused on the end results?
Look, in today's IT environments, speed, efficiency, reliability, these are all the keys that customers use to manage the success of a solution. And I think far too often, clients are focused on the task at hand, keeping operations running, and when there are changes made to the stack, focusing on the deployment, ensuring that there's as little disruption or changes to the end clients. And for me, what this leads to is a lot of technical debt in the environment. So legacy systems. Okay. We need to look at this and make a bit of a shift in our thinking to address this debt. Far too often, I've seen clients that have just added more solutions to their environments, without actually accounting for that legacy debt, removing systems. And I think to Ritchie's point, this leads to complex designs, performance issues as well. And when we start talking about multiple systems, decrypting things and scanning things, it does lead to excessive logs that are being created from different tools. These tools, these logs all need to be stored, and then sometimes they need to be reviewed by security teams, and that adds a lot of burden to customers.
Yeah, spot on. So it's a good reminder that even though the most elegant architecture doesn't matter if it's not delivering tangible improvements, and that the technical debt builds up faster when we just layer new tools on top of old thinking. All right, that gives us a solid view of how single pass plays a role in optimizing SASE. Let's take a step back now and look at the bigger picture again, and that's identity. Again, Hayden and I have spent multiple conversations or had lots of conversations around identity and how critical it is on any ZTNA journey. Because whether we're talking about ZTNA or SASE, identity is becoming the control point everything revolves around. So let's dig into what that really looks like in practice. Everyone agrees it's central to Zero Trust, but how do you make it practical? So Hayden, how do we see identity shaping the security model?
Yeah, so as you said, everyone agrees identity is a central point to Zero Trust, and I strongly agree with that. If you read any reference architectures or books regarding Zero Trust, you cannot get away from the one key statement. For Zero Trust to work, you need an identity anchor to ensure that the principles of Zero Trust can actually work. The identity anchor acts as the foundation onto which we build the stack. This principle allows us to have a single true source of identity that we can build off, and we can strictly control and monitor, and allows us to then build from there.
And Ritchie, what does that look like in the network flow itself?
Good question. So, in the network flow, identity is literally the foundation of the policy decision, right? I'd liken it to, try taking an aircraft journey without a passport, right? It'd be chaos, right? So when a user connects to the platform, the first thing that happens, for instance, is a check with the identity provider, the IDP, right? This verifies who that user is, what group they belong to, and what role they've got. But we don't stop there, right? We bind that identity to the session and then continuously check that device's posture. We check its security health, if you like. Now, if the user's laptop suddenly fails a posture mid-session, a posture check, then maybe perhaps the EDR, as the agent has stopped running, then that platform can or dynamically and instantly revoke or perhaps just downgrade their access to sensitive apps, right? And what we've done there is move that flow from a simplistic yes or no access decision at the perimeter to, well, yes, okay, but only for this one app, right? And because of this role, and not only for as long as your device stays healthy type decision, right? If we put all that together, then I think what we've got is something that sounds very zero trusty.
And I think I'm going to use that phrase, zero trusty. I like that, if you don't mind. Kyri, are you seeing more partners align identity solutions into their SASE offerings?
Absolutely, yeah. Identity is becoming a core part of modern SASE strategies, right? As Ritchie and Hayden mentioned previously as well. It serves as one of the central control points in Zero Trust, alongside with your device posturing capabilities and your application context as well. So together, these factors drive dynamic access decisions, also determining who can access what under specific conditions. So by continuously evaluating these signals in real time, admins can adapt policies on the go instantly, providing seamless access to when users meet the requirements, and also restricting access in the moment of a suspicious behavior is identified. So just an example that comes into my head. You can control the level of security you want by just allowing your users, for example, only internet access or both WAN and internet access, depending on a specific criteria, which that's providing that flexibility and that agility for the organizations to manage the users and what they're accessing as well, right?
I think both, Ritchie and Kiri have mentioned policy enforcement tied to identity. Hayden, do you see customers actually using that effectively, or is it still theory for most?
Yeah. So I think at the start of the journey, customers always start with the adoption of policy enforcement. Cluster checking, user identity controls and things like that. But as we go along, we end up abandoning the enforcement of policies in their environment, generally due to pushbacks from end users and the increasing ticket volumes from help desks for users who cannot operate. My personal view is on this, we should be looking to understand that policy enforcement is a key pillar of Zero Trust. And what we should be doing is we should be spending time educating our users on why these things have happened, and also then looking to use automation to perform remedial tasks on those systems. I don't know, Kiri, Ritchie, what do you agree with that?
Well, I certainly do. I think it's something that's probably often overlooked, to be honest, but I think any large-scale project, not just ZTNA, Zero Trust or SASE, but whatever, right? You need to have the user buy-in. And step one to that, for me, is letting them know why you're doing it, right? Because if you don't, then we know every organization's got that persona, right? That guy or girl, right? That's going to try and find a workaround, and we all know how dangerous they can be.
Yeah, as well, I totally agree with what Hayden mentioned there, and it's really important, especially around the identity and what users can access. They need to know what they can access so they can use the correct tools and applications in order to efficiently do their work as well. So yeah, definitely agree with that.
I think it's also key to understand what's driving the conversation as well. So when people talk about ZTNA, what's prompting that discussion? Is it about replacing VPNs, or is it something deeper, something else? Ritchie, if we look to 2026, do you think ZTNA will move away from the early adopters to becoming the default for remote access, or are there still gaps holding people back?
I think firstly, I'm not sure I'd call them early adopters anymore, Linton. I think ZTNA is now mature enough, and I think it's displacing VPN in sufficient quantities to be considered mainstream. And I think potentially this year it will rotate towards being the default remote access solution if it hasn't already. So, the main drivers for it, I would say, are probably an intersection of two things, right? Increase in remote users since COVID and cloud adoption, cloud transformation services. So organizations maybe are looking at their aging VPN infrastructure and realizing that simply buying more capacity, that won't fix sort of underlying security and performance problems. Sometimes the conversation's not just about replacing VPN either, right? Though it quite often is, but more commonly, I think people are looking to adopt that more holistic SASE strategy. And if they're going to do that, then I think ZTNA becomes the obvious evolution for secure access. Really, I don't want to use the phrase no-brainer, but because it simplifies, the network, simplifies the security, it does it all in one go and makes you future-proof.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you there. Kiri, from a channel perspective, are partners seeing more budget go towards SASE and ZTNA in the next year, do you think?
Yes, we're definitely seeing some more budget shifting, towards SASE and ZTNA this year. Organizations starting to realize that just expanding or patching their old VPNs won't solve their issues, their underlying performance and security challenges as well, right? And also according to Gartner, on a recent article that I was reading the other day, by 2026, almost 60% of all enterprises are expected to have implemented a zero trust approach as part of their security strategy. That aligns perfectly with what we're seeing in the channel, and companies want solutions that provide that simplicity for both networking and security approaches, right? And while also supporting those remote hybrid workforces, as Ritchie mentioned, especially after the pandemic of COVID-19, we had a huge increase in remote workforce.
Mm-hmm. And Hayden, the conversations you're having, what are clients asking that surprised you the most?
Yeah, Linton, honestly, there are three things that are still really surprising to me. Firstly is the number of customers that are just looking to lift and shift their existing VPNs, to ZTNA without an actual ZTNA framework or a strategy to do this. Secondly, it's astonishing the number of legacy systems that are still in production today that have wide access to the broader network with minimal controls to who can actually access them. And I think lastly for me, and I think it touches back to something I said earlier, it's just the amount of technical debt that customers have accumulated in their environments, whether it be policies or technologies, and the lack of the strategy to address those debts. We just continue to add more solutions on top of them. We don't address the debts.
Gents, I'm conscious of time, so I really appreciate your insight and I enjoy the conversation. We've covered a hell of a lot from the ZTNA and what ZTNA really means to how the identity, architecture, and integration fits into the bigger picture. Before we end the session today, Katie, are there any questions that have popped up?
Yes. So just a reminder to everyone, you can just put your questions in the Q&A and I can ask on your behalf. We do have one question from Noman. So I'll just quickly summarize it. It's a brilliant question. So specifically, so what is your perspective on the implementation convenience of ZTNA when addressing the inherent complexities surrounding the integration, identity management, device posture checks, policy engines, and the ZTNA gateway itself? So it's quite a big question. So I don't know if you want me to repeat that or if anyone wants to have a crack at it.
I'll have a first stab if you like. I think because it's such a massive subject that we could probably do an hour on it. But I think my initial one sentence, ultimately, a good SASE infrastructure, for instance, is built around a ZTNA technology, and that has all of those things. Basically, it was built to accommodate all of those things we just said, the IDP, everything else. And when we talk about gateways, then if we're talking about a proper cloud-based solution, then those gateways are it should be at pretty much every POP worldwide, close to the user anyway. So I would say it would be a lot easier than trying to construct a VPN in the old-fashioned way, because it was set up to do all of those things from day one.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add to that? Hayden, Kiri?
I think just from my side, so it goes back to planning the deployments, looking at each individual component and addressing those components bit by bit, and from there you build your strategy into those different areas of the ZTNA of the zero trust network architecture. Basically, it's not just we'll go and deploy it. It's looking at each individual component and how we can bring it in, how much information, how much value does it add into the environment, and then bringing in the key metrics, and then starting to move over to the next aspect of it. And once you've got that, documenting it and seeing if it logically flows through from start to finish. Linton? Yeah,
I think touching on a conversation we were having earlier, which is zero trust and ZTNA is a journey. You don't just buy a product and off you go. You can have to get all the basics and the plumbing right, and that makes the journey a lot easier. But you have to kind of invest the time and energy. And I get No Man's question there, right? Is how convenient is it? And I think it's something that you're not going to just switch on, and it's something that you need to work on over a period of time. So having a well thought out strategy on how you're going to adopt zero trust is critical.
Brilliant.
Katie, any other questions?
So I don't think there are any other questions. I think we probably have time for just one more. So I might take the opportunity just to ask one that's come into my mind while I was listening to you guys. And it is about this idea about consolidating into one platform. And is there not a risk if you consolidate everything into one platform that you kind of are doing, you're putting all your eggs into one basket? So I don't know if anyone's got time to answer that one quickly before we finish.
Throw that toward Ritchie. Right? Yeah.
That's a mic drop question, isn't it? Right. Okay. So look, I think there's two parts to this, because it is a really good question. It's very valid, and it will be in the back of a lot of people's minds. So I'm glad you asked it. So I think there's, like I say, there's two main answers to this. Firstly, right. Well, guess what? I think you're already doing it. Right? How many people on this session have got Windows laptops with Office applications or Office 365 being protected by Defender, right? Maybe they got their applications are all up in the Azure infrastructure, right? So it's already a thing for most organizations, and it's similar with Google for many as well. And secondly, I think it's now recognized by the vast majority of organizations, and in fact is being pushed by organizations like Gartner, who specifically identify and call this out, that the risk of point product gaps, combined with having multiple technologies, multiple CVEs that are very difficult to keep on top of, that's a far greater risk than a catastrophic failure of a single vendor, which is highly unlikely.
Okay, thanks. That does make a lot more sense, and actually just makes me feel a lot more confident in the idea of consolidation. So thank you so much for taking the time to answer. I'd like to just hand it back over now to Linton to wrap up for today.
I think Ritchie's teed up another 1 hour session on another conversation. That's all good. That brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you so much for joining us. We've covered a lot today, from what ZTNA really means to how identity, architecture, and integration all play a part in moving beyond legacy access models. I hope the discussion helped bring some clarity around what's working in the real world and what's worth questioning. Please take a moment to share your feedback in our final poll that Katie's just put up. If you would like to explore how these ideas apply to your organization, feel free to reach out to the Secon team, or feel free to connect directly with any of our speakers today. And a big thank you to Ritchie, Kyri, and Hayden for sharing your insights and your thoughts, and to all of you for joining us online. We hope to see you again at another Cybersecurity in Focus session, and we wish you the rest a pleasant week.